My grandfather grew up as a kid in Vienna in Austria, I think in the third arrondissement with his family. And his dad was a lawyer. I can't remember what his mom did.
There were many things he loved about Vienna, most of all sneaking into the opera to stand in the back to watch the shows for free. But unfortunately, as the 1930s went on, Vienna became not such a friendly place for Jews.
In the years just leading up to the Holocaust, the family sustained a bunch of really, really awful hardships.
They threw us out of the high school that I was in, and the rest of the Jews, and made us go to the Jewish high school.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm blocking on the name, it'll come to me. So it was named Jewish, it was like Chaim something or other.
Yeah.
And so, of course, by this time the Germans were in charge, and the Hitler Youth was very active.
But did you ever have any run-ins with the Hitler Youth?
Well, that's the whole point. Every afternoon when we left school, the Hitler Youth were waiting for us to beat us up.
Kurt used to get beaten up by the brown shirt kids on the way to school every day. Nonetheless, his family felt like they belonged in Vienna and did not want to leave. That changed in 1938 after Kristallnacht.
His immediate family, his mother, his father, and him, were lucky enough to be able to leave right around the time of Kristallnacht, I think.
When the Nazis came and arrested Kurt's father, who was very politically active and also had a number of businesses that the Nazis were interested in seizing. They gave those businesses to one of their sympathizers and threw Kurt's father in jail. Kurt was 12 at the time. At that point, the Nazis hadn't yet started killing the Jews. Instead, their policy was really just to seize their property and make life very difficult for them. Kurt's mother, who at that point had really been just a housewife in Vienna, what they called a Hausfrau, jumped into action. She needed to do two things. She needed to get Kurt's father out of jail, and she needed to get them away out of the country. At that point, it was not very easy for Jews to leave the country, and the only way that you could realistically get out of Austria was to get a transit visa to Switzerland.
And they, after several different attempts, ended up finally acquiring visas and fled from their home in Vienna.
With this visa, Switzerland would let you in for 2 weeks under the assumption that you were on your way to somewhere else. My grandmother, Kurt's mother, went and first got a visa to Shanghai, which she was then able to trade to a visa to South Africa, and kept trading it until she got something that would allow her to get the 2-week transit visa to Switzerland. As soon as she got that, she then got Kurt's father out of jail. We never found out exactly what she did to make the SS officer agree to let him out, but the SS officer did. Kurt's father came back. They had about a half an hour to pack, and because Jews were not allowed to take anything valuable out of the country, they had to leave almost everything behind. Kurt was a huge music lover and played the clarinet, which was his most valuable and prized possession, but he had to leave it at home. They hurriedly packed, and they made their way to the Swiss border, with the Nazis in pursuit. They got to the border, and there their possessions were searched to make sure that they weren't removing any valuables. When they got to Kurt's luggage, they found a stamp album. Kurt's favorite hobby, other than music, was collecting stamps. Unfortunately, the guards thought that they were trying to smuggle money out of Austria in the form of rare stamps, which is something that some Jews had tried to do. And they were getting ready to send them back across the Austrian border, back to the Nazis who were waiting for my father's family. At that point, one of the border guards stepped up and said, "Wait, let me take a look." And he looked at the album and he said, "No, this is just a child's collection. It has no value. They can come across." And so they were let into Switzerland. Every 2 weeks, the Swiss tried to send them back, but my grandmother, Kurt's mother, was able to get an extension of the 2-week visa until they were finally able to get a visa to England, where they spent 2 years as a refugee.
And landed in the UK. I think they stayed in the UK for about a year before making the transatlantic voyage and ending up in Pittsburgh.
And then eventually to the United States. My father kept the stamp album all through that time, and it still sits in his apartment today. In fact, the reason that I heard this story was when I asked about the stamp album, because up until that point, my dad had not been eager to talk about his time in the 1930s in Austria. Other stories came out once he started to tell them, including that when he turned 18, he joined the army immediately and signed up to go back to Europe. He arrived in France shortly after D-Day and fought his way through Europe as a forward observer in the army, where he was able to use his math skills to help guide artillery from ahead of the front line. It was a dangerous job because if you miscalculated, the artillery shells would land on you instead of on the Germans. All he had to make these calculations was a slide rule. He survived. He made his way to Vienna, where he got assigned to the military police. And the first thing he did was go back to his old home, where the person who had seized his father's business still lived. He knocked on the door. The man answered, and my father said, "Do you know who I am?" The man said, "No." And he said, "My name is Hirschhorn." And the man blanched, and my father said, "You're under arrest." And he arrested him for his role with the Nazis. I asked my dad later, "What happened to that man?" He said, "I didn't care. Once I'd arrested him, I had done what I needed to do." Thank you for listening to this story.